Ivan, is Square Enix happy with the greater control they have over the GPU now?
Yeah, so talking about D3D12, the first thing I want to mention is that with D3D12, developers are getting greater control over the GPU. One of the biggest changes is in how you bind the resources, textures, and buffers to the shader stages. With D3D12, developers are free to manage the limited space that's available for resource binding. So we can choose to use tables, and that allows us to bind more resources, or we can use the single resources and inline constants, which are cheaper. For example, it's possible to bind all the resources that were in D3D11 spec, so 128 textures and 16 buffers. But if you do that, you'll probably have to cache and manage all that state, and that might be quite heavy on the CPU. So I like that we get to choose if we want to have more resources, but then we'll have to spend a little bit more CPU time managing that, or we want to have the raw power, and then we can bind less resources to the shaders.
So you have a choice between whether to allow the driver to manage or to manage yourself.
Yes, so when talking about memory management in D3D12, it allows us to directly manage the GPU memory. So the way it works, we allocate the large heaps and then we sub-allocate resources into those heaps. So now developers are able to detect the out-of-memory conditions and then react to that accordingly. So for example, if we detect that, we can move some of the resources back to the main memory, or we can decide to defragment that heap. At the same time, there is still a way to let the driver to manage the memory for you. So you can choose if you want to manage the memory yourself for some heaps, and for the others you can let the driver to do the work for you.
So what will Square Enix be able to do with DX12 that you think customers will appreciate the most?
So one important change in D3D12 is a lower cost of the draw call. So we are also allowed to create commands on the GPU, several threads at the same time. So I think if developers can leverage this properly, it's possible to provide a better experience for the players that they can appreciate. For example, we might have more moving, unique-looking objects, or we can have more shadow casting lights, or we can have larger draw distance.
So the lower cost of a draw call will potentially give you a much greater increase in your draw call count, will it not?
Yes, right. So I think increased draw call count is quite important. With GPUs becoming faster and faster every year, I think the graphics APIs haven't evolved so fast over the past few years. So with D3D12, I think that's going to change, and we can finally utilize the modern GPUs to the fullest.
So how long did it take Square Enix to port to DX12? Did you run into many problems, or was it rather straightforward?
So I think it took around 3 weeks to get the basic rendering working. And comparing this to my previous experiences of implementing a new graphics API layer, I would say it was quite straightforward. However, I have to mention that this was a direct port, and it wasn't using many of the unique features of D3D12. Going forward, I think we're going to adjust some of our systems in the engine to better match D3D12. So personally, I think it's not very difficult. It wasn't very difficult for us to try the D3D12, but with any new platform and any new graphics API, you probably know that you need some time before you can utilize the API for the 100%.
Great, thank you for your time.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.